pray this morning. Lord, we love you. We thank you for this day, God. And you've got something for us today. God, you want to open our heart and show us some things that we haven't seen before today. So we praise you. We lift you up. We thank you for this time that we've had this morning just to be in your house already, God. And we look forward to what you're going to do today. In your name I pray. Amen. Kids, you can be dismissed. If you'll follow me, someone at the back here that can show you where to go. Y'all know where to go. I know that, there's times that I probably deserve April's wrath and I don't get it. And so I'm thankful for that. I remember this scripture where Jesus, or God, he comes to Adam in the garden and he says, Adam, he says he's naked, and he says, well, who told you that? And there's things that I think are told to us sometimes in the back of our mind, and we say, oh, God's mad at me and these things. And I think if God was to talk to us, he would say, well, who told you that? Who's telling you those things? Who's telling you that you're not good enough, that it's not enough for you to do this, or that you're too far gone for God to save you, or you've done so much wrong? Don't you think that Jesus' blood is still good for all those things? I mean, come on. Can we really do something so bad, so terrible, that his blood's not good enough to wash it clean? Do we do things on a daily basis that are so bad, and we do so many of them, that his blood can't wash it clean when we come to him? Thank goodness they can. And so today I want to show you this story, and it's the story where Jesus kind of reinstates Peter after the cross. Peter, he's about, when the cross happens, and they ask him, they say, oh, you're one of the followers of Jesus, you're one of the followers of the way. And he says, oh, I don't know the man. And it's a really pivotal part of the story, and if anybody could be forgotten by Jesus, you'd think it'd be Peter at this point. But he's not. And I want to show you this. It's the mercy rule. It's the story of true mercy. It's centered around the greatest story of mercy that's ever been told, and that's the story of the cross, where we deserve death, but through Jesus we have life forever. And it's the great gift of Jesus' mercy. I would say the cross is that. And then this story is kind of mixed in between that. It's the story that we look at today gives us a first-hand look at the life of a good man who made a bad mistake, and Jesus saw past the mistake, and he saw the heart of the man. You got to understand, if you can look past people's mistakes and you can give forgiveness, Jesus is real good at that. You know what I'm saying? If he wouldn't, there wouldn't be any reason for us to even meet this morning. Amen. I wouldn't be up here to talk to you, and you wouldn't be there to listen, because if he wasn't looking past our mistakes, if he was just looking at our failures, there wouldn't even be any story today to tell. If you have your Bibles and you want to turn with me, you can turn to Matthew chapter 26. And we're going to look at verse 31 to start off with this morning. I'll give you just a minute to turn there. Matthew chapter 26, verse 31, it says this, Then Jesus told them, This very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. And Peter replied, even if all fall away on your account, I never will. He says, Truly I tell you, Jesus answered, This very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. This is Jesus' last words kind of to Peter before the cross. He says, hey man, you're fixing to deny me. He says, man, I'm not going to deny you. It's because he deeply loves him. This is not some happenstance relationship. This is somebody who's lived with Jesus, who's spent time with Jesus. It's a friendship. It'd be like me and Kate would be like, man, even if everything goes south, I'm going to stand with you. because I love you and I care about you. It's not like wishy-washy. Peter's not like just trying to decide who the real God is. He really loves Jesus, and he tells me, he says, even if I have to die with you, I'm not going to disown you. And it's easy for us to think that you'll never do it. I'll never fail you. I'll never disown you. But we look at Peter, and if we think we never will, Peter had been with Jesus. Peter knew Jesus, and Peter loved Jesus. He was a passionate go-getter. Remember, it's Peter who walked on the water to Jesus. There wasn't 11 more standing in line to get out there on the water. It was Peter who was in the garden when Jesus prayed, and it was Peter who cut off the soldier's ears when they came to arrest, or soldier's ear when he came to arrest Jesus. And I guarantee you, he wasn't aiming for the ear. I really wish that story was a little different. I wish Jesus just picked the guy's head up, put it back on his shoulder. Because I guarantee it'd have been a lot better story. I really think that's what when you pull out your sword, I don't think, I'm going to get your ear and you're going to like this. I think the guy went, whoo, it got his ear. And I think even more people would have been amused by the whole head. But Peter doesn't have the appearance of this lukewarm bystander, but yet Jesus knows it's about to get bad. And in order to save yourself, Peter, you're going to deny me. You ever do one of those things to save your own skin? That really denied him? You didn't want everybody to know who you really were. So you told them a version of yourself that wasn't true. And the fact that you may be at odds with what God's call is on your life or the will of the Lord in order for you to look good in front of them. And we do not have the intentions to fail the Lord. We're just met with situations where, number one, we're weak. And then we're questioned. And then we're tempted. And then, or maybe it's in fear that we fail. And in those moments like that, it's those times that we realize how frail we are. We think we're these big Christians, but when somebody comes and they put their finger in your face and say, did you do this? What do your kids do? No. And they got it's like paint on the wall, and they got paint on them, It's like, I know you did. I watched you from the other room. I heard you say something. I experienced it. Yet you're telling me, and I'm thinking God knows the same thing because you're like, I didn't do that. And he's up there going, I saw you. You think I didn't see it? When you did whatever you did, I'm just saying, just tell me that it was you that did it. And if the sword, I found this, if the sword is not constantly sharpened, it'll be dull at the time it is needed for the attack. If the sword is not constantly sharpened, it'll be dull at the time it's needed for attack. And what I mean by that is if you're not working on being like Christ, you won't be like him when you need to be like him the most. Amen. In other words, I might need to get my word open. I might need to read as much as I can and absorb as much as I can. And I may need to pray for his help. And I may need to pray for his understanding. Because if anybody else is doing the Bible read through right now in Numbers, I need his understanding. Why are we reading this? I don't know that I need to know who we got who. I don't need to know what it takes to get clearance to go into this place or to go in this one. It's just beyond me. But what I found out is if my sword is not sharpened, when it's ready, when it's time for attack, it'll be too dull to do the job. And I've seen Christians who are too dull to do the job. They don't know the word. They don't have the word stored up in them. So when they get mad, what happens is what's inside vomits out to the outside. When it could be that the word is on the inside. And when somebody says something to you, it just goes in their mind for a brief minute. Maybe they're going through something. And you stop. And you love them right where they're at. And you pray for them and you walk away. See, what I mean by that is you must be prepared for the attacks of the enemy at all times. Because he has formed a plan against your life. If you think, oh, I'm good. There will be a time that you'll leave yourself most vulnerable to the devil's attacks. And what I mean by that is this verse right here, Proverbs 16:18. It says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And what will happen is you'll be like, oh, I'm good. I know the Lord. I know the Word. I'm in the Word every day. And you'll go to work and you'll mess up. You'll lie. You'll say something you shouldn't have said. You'll get mad when you normally wouldn't get mad. It's because at that moment that pride puffs up is somehow we forsake the gospel and we walk away sometimes and we do things that we didn't think we would do. And I think the devil looks for those big moments of us where we're not depending on God 100% and he touches us at that moment and he says, you know what? If I shoot this arrow at this time, it'll make the most damage. And before we know it, maybe in our marriage, It's like everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden this one little word slips out of your mouth, you say something, and it does damage. And then you're in a heated discussion. We'll call it discussion this morning. Have you ever been there before? Evidently, I've been prideful a lot of times in my marriage. It's a warning here. We look at Proverbs 16:18. It's a warning from a wise man who writes it, not just to tell you, but because he's experienced it. You got to realize that. What is hindsight? Hindsight is 20/20. You've made mistakes before. It's easy to see what the solution to them are, but if you've never made them, it's hard. And I think he's writing from his experience here. He said, pride, it goes before destruction. I think because he had pride and then he had destruction. And a haughty spirit comes before a fall. And he's saying, you know what? You don't have to go through this if you'll learn from what I'm telling you. It's a warning from the wise. Peter was confident that he would never abandon Jesus, and his weakness was exposed. The devil knew what would cause Peter to deny. It was his fear of dying. So the devil used Peter's possibility of dying to produce what? Peter's denial of Christ. What are you afraid of? What areas of your life have you not given over to? You say, oh, you can come this far, but if you come a little bit further than that, I don't know that I can. Those are the areas that we have to drum up and ask God to come in. Say, oh, I could never go through that. You might have to. You might have to. But what I know is that God's strong enough to carry us through those times. And he was strong enough to carry Peter through this time. The devil knew what would cause Peter to deny. So he said, you know what? I know Peter's breaking point is him dying himself. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to offer him today. Is if we do not sharpen the sword, I found it's not ready for battle. And we can know the word and be ready when the devil attacks, when his attacks come. We can know the word. What we say, oh, if I know the word, then I'm armed when the attack comes. If I know what's coming at me, then I know how to prepare for it. Peter had not been like Christ. He had done the things he said he would never do. He had denied he knew Jesus. In his fear, he lied to save his own skin. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever done this? Lied to save your own skin. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, one day, I'll get forgiveness for this. You might even say, oh, Lord, turn your head for a minute. Let me go over here. And you think in the back of your mind, I'm gonna say this, but I'm gonna get forgiveness for it one day. It's gonna be okay. And you lie to save your own skin. You didn't mean for it to happen. But when faced with uncertainty, what? You lie to save yourself. And Peter has done the same thing here. He's about to go. He's going. Jesus is getting beat. He wants to go to the cross, and Peter thinks he may go too. So he says, you know what? I don't even know him. And you know what? When he said it the third time, he remembered what Jesus had told him. You're going to deny me 3 times. And you know what? Just like it'll be for you and I bet on the inside it just, I did exactly what he told me I would do. Not that Jesus made him do it, but Jesus knew he would do it. He lied to save his own skin. Jesus had told Peter he would deny him. But what did Peter do? He refused to believe it. I imagine that Peter felt a lot of guilt and shame over it, much like we do when we fail. But even more, it wasn't just Peter, and it wasn't just God, but it was his friend. It was his guide and his teacher. Not only that had been beaten, but had died. And he left and went back to what he always had done. He went back to fishing. If you read any of the story after Jesus dies, he finds Peter and he's fishing. And Jesus could have left him there, but he didn't. He sought him out, he called to him, and he reinstated him. What do we do? When we don't know what to do, we go back to what we've always done. It's like, I've done this, I've preached, I've been a preacher, but if you know what, if they told me more, they said, you're not going to be the preacher of Cornerstone anymore, I guess I would go back and do what I did before. Maybe I would just go back to, sitting out in the audience and listen to what, God has for me, and I would just reevaluate, and I would redo, but I would go back to something from here. And Peter, what I love about him is after Jesus comes to him, he never denies Christ again. And even when he's met with death, legend is that he was crucified upside down because he said, you know what, I'm not worthy to die like Christ. But after the resurrection of Jesus, he found Peter. Interesting enough, he came to where Peter was, and Peter was back doing what he had always done before he had met Jesus. It didn't say that when Jesus had, there was rumor, or there was a story of Jesus had risen from the dead. Well, it doesn't say that, that Peter just sought him out and went and followed him and all these things. No, Peter went back fishing. He went back to what he always did, because you know what we do? When we get away from God, we'll go back to what we used to do. We'll go back to what we've always done. And that's why when people, they'll come to church for a little while, they'll get their life straight with the Lord, but you know what? They start messing up, and it's funny, you'll find them exactly where you found them the first time. They'll be back doing the same old things they've always done. And that's what Peter did. He went back to doing what he'd always done. He went back to what he had always known. He went back to what he was always known for. And I've seen this with people do the same exact thing. They'll be back in the same bar doing the exact same thing. They'll be back doing the same drugs. They'll be back going to the same places that they used to go to before they didn't know the Lord. They'll be back to sleeping in on Sunday instead of getting up and coming to church. They'll be back doing what they've always done. And you know what's sad is they'll get what they've always gotten. But Jesus is the X factor. He's the point of change. When we're introduced to Him, it changes our direction. So unless we go where He goes, we end up in a different direction. We want to run to what is familiar when things get difficult. And like I said, this is why some Christians leave the church. They go back to what they used to do. And we try to become, what's interesting is we try to become who we used to be. But the problem is now we know the truth. So that's the difference. You say, oh, I'll go back and I'll do the things that I used to do. But in the back of your mind, you're like, man, I know Jesus is the way. And it never fits like it did before. Why? Because now you know what you used to do is very wrong. And you know that in your heart is in complete rebellion now to what God has for you. And you start listening to that voice, and you're trying to do those things that you used to do, and they don't fulfill you like they used to fulfill you. Why? Because there's this thing about you that knows that Jesus is the only way. And I guarantee you, as Peter was on that boat, and he was throwing those lines out, and he was fishing, he had those nets scattered. In the back of his mind, I promise you, all he could think about was, man, I failed Jesus. I had this moment. I had this life. I had been trained to go out and teach people, to go out and love people. I had seen people healed. I had been there when people were fed. I had seen miracle after miracle. And now I'm back on this boat doing what I've always done because I don't know where else to go. Haven't you ever been there before? We just walked away and you're like, man, I just can't. This is just too tough. And I'm kind of like, well, where are you walking away from? Where are you going to go? Like right now, if I decided, you know what, I can't do this Jesus thing anymore. Well, where would I go? Where would I fit? It'd be miserable. We always tend to go back to what's familiar. When Peter denied Jesus, I believe it crushed Peter's spirit because of his love for him. And he had just let his fear become more important than their relationship. And I have no doubt that the failure ate Peter. I believe he punished himself saying things like, you know what, I need better than that. You ever done something and you go, I need better than that. And then he already said something like, I really loved him. And I love to kill him. That'd be tough. To know that I just turned my back and somebody I love, somebody I cared about, somebody I had slept next to, somebody I had leaned up against, somebody I had embraced, and I just let him kill him. And he said things like, maybe I stood by denying him that I knew him when he was dying. And I can tell you that, I bet that weight for Peter was very heavy. So Peter retreated back to what he knew before Jesus because in his mind he thought, this Jesus thing is over. But how could Peter go back to his old life now that he knew Jesus? Let's look at here. John chapter 21. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee. And it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. And Peter said, I'm going out to fish. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Does this story sound familiar to you? This is almost directly reflection of when Jesus meets Peter the first time. They caught nothing. He said, early in the morning, though, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. So they saw somebody from a distance, and they seen him stand on the shore. And he called out to them, he said, friends, haven't you any fish? And they answered, no. And he said, throw your nets on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciples disciple whom Jesus loved, we believe that to be John, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped in the water. And the other disciples followed the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. So Peter swims 100 yards because he sees that it's Jesus. And when they landed, they saw a fire burning of coals, and there were fish on it, and some bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have caught." So Simon Peter climbed back in the boat and dragged the net ashore. And it was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." And none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Only you would talk to us like that, Lord. See, Peter's out working, right? He's fishing. He's doing what he's always done before Jesus. And then Jesus performs the same miracle he did for Peter the first day he followed him and left it all. And they've been fishing all night and they've caught nothing. And then Jesus shows up and their nets are so full that they can't even bring them in. And Jesus has provided again. And where they had nothing, now they had plenty. And immediately John says, "It's the Lord." And upon hearing this, Peter does not wait for the boats to dock. He does not wait to help bring in the fish. He does what Peter has always done. He literally dives in head first. He swims to the shore while the others are bringing in the fish because he cannot contain his excitement and his chance to see Jesus. What is it? It's just like when you've made something wrong with somebody and you want to make it right. You just can't wait for that moment to reconcile the difference that you have. And when he saw the Jesus on the shore, he dives in the water because Peter is like that. You remember, he pulls the sword, he cuts off the ear, he walks to Jesus on the water. In the same way he brings repentance, he says, "I'm going to dive in head first." We can learn something from Peter instead of running away from our problems. You know what? Sometimes you just got to dive in and swim to Jesus. Amen. Sometimes, you got to forget all of the past and you got to look forward to just making reconciliation with the Savior. And this is what I want you to see, because this is the point where mercy begins. Mercy begins because Jesus reinstates Peter. Peter's past didn't prevent God's plan. And I want you to understand something this morning. Your past isn't preventing God's plan. What you've gone through, what's happened to you, what you've done in spite of God, what you might have done in spite of God this morning is not preventing God from His plan for you. Jesus is not done with Peter. He may have messed up, but the mercy of the Lord does not disqualify you from serving. The mercy of God does not disqualify you. I don't know why we think that all of a sudden, because we had one mess up, that we're no longer good for anything that the Lord has to do. And I want to say, just like God did, who told you that? Who's telling you that you're not good enough? You can still serve the Lord, and you can still work for the Lord. There's things that you can do. And at this point, the mercy of the Lord invites Peter to carry out what he has learned. People who think Jesus is done with him because of one mistake, they need to read this story. Here is somebody who was at the cross with Jesus, and yet he denied even knowing him. And so I'm going to say, you know what? You probably haven't done something to that level. And people who think that they've done too much wrong for Jesus to use them, they need to read this story. Let's go a little further. John 21, verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Like all these others around him. He says, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you." Jesus said this, "If you love me, then feed my lambs." And again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he answered, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "What?" He said, "Take care of my sheep." And the third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was hurt that Jesus asked him a third time. He said, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "What? Feed my sheep." And then he tells him, he says, "Very truly I tell you, when you were young, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. And when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you to where you do not want to go." And Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." He asked him 3 times. That was a big deal. He didn't ask somebody 3 times just anything. It was very serious. It was almost offensive to Peter that he would ask him 3 times, do you really love me? Do you love me? Come on, man. Do you love me? The three is symbolic there. He said it was offensive almost to Peter. He says, God, you know I love you, Jesus. I love you. But he asked him. He said, every time he said, feed my sheep. Take care of my lambs. Feed my sheep. Jesus is reinstating Peter's mission for life. He says, you know what? You are the rock whom I'm supposed to build the church on. How many times have we been received back even at our worst moments? I mean, this is Peter's worst moment, and he's received back. It's not just Peter. It's you and me. We loved him, yet we denied him when it was scary or tough. Let's be honest. We know there's times like that. You would think that Jesus would scold Peter at this point. Hey man, why did you say you didn't know me? I mean, why did you do what you've always done? Why did you act this way? Or why? You would think that he would bring it up. Just like when you're arguing with your spouse and all of a sudden one of you becomes a historian and you remember everything that they've ever done against you. You would think that that's how Jesus would do. He'd say, oh Peter, you remember. And you would think at this time that he would scold him. He failed at the time that Jesus needed him the most. But Jesus didn't do that. Jesus didn't hold Peter's past mistakes over his head. What did he do? He simply brought him to the side. Aren't you glad for a kind of a God like that? Who doesn't look at your past and say, you know what, remember this time when you messed up? No, he says, hey, if you want to be part of me, you come to me. And Jesus never wasted time talking about Peter's past. What did he do? He only forecasted his future. He said, this is where you're going. Feed my sheep. One day they're going to carry you to a place you don't want to go. And you're going to go with people who you don't want to go with. To a place that you don't want to go. In other words, you're going to get crucified. They're going to dress you. In other words, they're going to beat you. They're going to clothe you in these clothes. You're going to go out there, and this is your future. To feed my sheep. And Jesus told him he would deny him, and it happened. He told him that there was coming a day when he would die for Jesus, and he did. He also told him this, though. He told him, he said, your name's Peter. It means Petros. It's Greek for like the rock, bedrock. Petra, the rock. That's why you got that Christian rock band named Petra. I don't know if you know that. It's called rock. So everybody's like, you. I was kind of didn't know that as a kid, but that's for some of you older ones that you'll get that reference. And he says, upon this rock, he said, I'm going to build my church. And it's interesting that he told him, he said, oh, you're Peter. You're not Simon. Simon means like a reed swaying in the wind. Okay? And that's who it was. And then he says, you're Peter. No, you're the rock. And I don't have the picture of the big, the rock guy up there this morning like we know in the past. But what I would say is, he said, upon this rock, I'm going to build my church. And then one of the last things that Jesus tells him, he says, you know what? Feed my sheep. It points back to what he had told him. He said, I'm going to build my church upon you. It hasn't changed. The call that I have on your life hasn't changed. Take care of my sheep. Build my church. Upon you, I'm going to build my church. Take care of my sheep. Feed my lambs. His plan has not changed any. Well, and I looked at this and I said, well, what is mercy? It's this. It's something so simple as it's deserving punishment and not receiving it. Some of you, when your kid runs through the house, you're merciful. Sometimes we're not. And the dictionary defines it simple as this. It says that mercy is kind and gentle treatment of someone such as a wrongdoer or an opponent who has no right to it. And that's what Jesus gives Peter. It's the mercy rule. Peter, by most standard, deserved what? He deserved wrath. He denied Jesus, but he didn't receive Jesus' wrath. He actually received something way different. He received Jesus' heart. This scripture that we're reading where he says, you love me, you feed my sheep, and all these things, it's an intimate time. It's a close time. It's not a time of Jesus getting on with Peter. It's not a heated time. It's a time where he actually shows him his heart. And you know what he deserves? He deserves his wrath. And I guarantee you there's been multiple times in my life where I deserve the wrath of God, but I got the mercy of God. Where I did my own thing and I deserve God just to be upset with me. And you know what? In those moments, I felt him like this. It was like, do you love me? Feed my sheep. People may come in our life who deserve our wrath. But if you give them your heart instead, it may be one of the greatest things that can ever happen to them. And it may be more drawing than giving them your wrath. There's people that come into our life and they do us wrong and they deserve a full-out punishment. I won't even disagree with you and say they don't deserve that. But what I will say to you is this. I'll say, you know what? If instead of your wrath, you'll give him your heart, And you'll say, you know what? I'm going to love you in spite of what you've done to me. It may be the one thing that changes him. Jesus used Peter to reach us. Notice Jesus asked him the question 3 times. He said, Peter, do you love me? And like I said, it's symbolic that he asked him 3 times because it was offensive to be asked 3 times the same question. But I found this. You only ask that when you're very serious. And Jesus responded the same way after the answer that Peter gave. He answered, feed my sheep. It was the master saying, if you really love me, then you got to love what I love. And one of the ways you got to love what I love is you got to feed my sheep. And what I found too is he used the feed my sheep. A shepherd lives and dies for their sheep. And Jesus had done that. He had lived for them. He told them all about him. And then he died for them. And if Jesus had given his life so you could live, it was very important to him that Peter take up the banner and care for his people. Notice Peter's role. Before Peter denied him, Jesus told Peter who he was. He said, you're bedrock. He said, and build my church. Here's your people. Love my people. He said, I'm going to build my people upon you. And the people who will love me and carry my name. And now that Peter has denied Jesus and is sitting here, Jesus is reinstating Peter. And the good thing about it is the plan never changed. Just because Peter's actions changed, he did not ever change God's plan. Jesus says, what? Feed my sheep. Take care of my lambs. Take care of my people. Teach them, feed them, and show them. And from that point on, we never see a Peter again who denies Jesus. Peter actually had received mercy when he deserved wrath, and because of it, he had changed his very outcome. When he was met with death again, not only did he embrace it, but he said, I'm not going to die like Jesus because that's not the way it ought to be. It wasn't wrath that changed Peter, although he deserved it. And I'll be honest, sometimes I want to give wrath, and I'm reminded that I need to give mercy. It wasn't the wrath that changed Peter. He deserved it. It was the mercy. He deserved wrath, but got love. It was not getting what he deserved that changed everything. And when you realize this, that not only did Peter not get what he deserved, but you haven't gotten what you deserve. You've gotten love in place of your denial, of your sin, of the things that you do that don't make God proud. We've gotten love in place of that. A love that would come to a cross and that would die for you. And then he loved us enough to even lay down his own life for us. What I love about Jesus is this. He said, greater love hath no one than a man to lay down his life for his friends. And I think, oh, that's great. But then he went out and did it. Then he went, I should love that love. Tries to lock that door every time. But what I know is that, this morning, if you think that God is out to get you, he's not. He's out to actually bring you closer to his side. He's out to love you, and he's out to walk with you. And he's not got wrath stored up for you today. He's got mercy stored up for you, and it's available for you. I'm going to ask the worship team, will they come this morning and prepare? But what I'm saying this morning is if you think there's a God up there who's ready to strike you down, it's wrong. There's a God who's up there who's ready to love you and wants to care with you and wants to reinstate you and still has the same plan and purpose for you that he birthed you for, that you were born to do, and he wants you to start doing it. And I think that's the reason that he came to Peter the way that he did. He sat by him next to the river. He sought him out in the midst of his trouble, in the midst of his own problems. And he said, you know what? Today is the day that you have. I'm going to reinstate you. I'm going to love you right where you're at. Jesus came to where Peter was. Peter didn't come to where Jesus was. And this morning I would tell you the same thing, that Jesus is not waiting for you to come where he is. He's already come to where you are. And mercy is available for you this morning if you'll just ask for it. Let's stand together this morning as they begin to sing, as they begin to worship. I want to know that the altars are open and you can just lay your sins in and say, Lord, I just want to walk with you from now on. I want to be part of what you got going on.